Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is Chris Martinez. I am the host of Operation Agency Freedom. And of course, in my day job, I am also the CEO and founder of Bloom, where we work with marketing agencies and provide management consulting and technology to increase profit, maximize your agency's value, unlock your potential, and achieve an 8-figure exit. And today on the show, I have all the way from Arizona, I have Karen Cummings, who is the CEO and founder of Radiant Marketing. She received her bachelor's degree in marketing from ASU and started her first agency at the young age of 24, the same year that she actually got married. And then she founded Radiant Marketing in 2015. Radiant is a fully remote digital marketing agency that's based in Arizona, and they specialize in working in the healthcare niche. So, welcome to the show, Karen. How's it going?
Oh, thank you for having me, and I'm gonna have to match that enthusiasm
I know it
because that
always
was a beautiful intro.
so it's funny that you bring this up because when we're talking before the show, I know I'm like kind of mellow and like chill. And I normally have to warn people. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like ramp up the energy. So like don't be shocked. And I forgot to do that with you. So I apologize for that. But yeah,
No, I love it.
let's bring it today. What do you say?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. So while we were chatting, you were originally born and raised in Southern California, likewise, but then moved to Arizona and then you went to school there. I kind of like to talk about college education because it's a little bit of a weird topic in some circles. But you studied marketing at ASU, known as a party school. I went to UC Santa Barbara, so known as a
Mhm.
party school. Did you always know that you wanted to get into marketing and advertising when you enrolled, or was it something you discovered?
It was something I discovered. I was never one of those people that was like, "This is what I wanna do with my
Right.
life." I actually started in accounting. I am very much like a numbers person, so I think that's
Okay.
a unique perspective I bring to my agency is we're focused on the data and, the analytical side of it.
Uh huh.
But I also am very creative and I like
Hmm.
to, I always like to draw and
Hmm.
was very, kind of artistic growing up. But I realized accounting was not for me.
Hmm.
So I started to explore some other things in the business in the WPP Carey School of Business and
Hmm.
ventured into graphic design and then went fully into marketing. So, and realized it was just really kind of perfect for me because it gave me a little bit of everything. It was,
Yeah.
it's a field that's so interesting and kind of
Hmm.
ever changing and evolving. And I definitely am someone that likes change and,
Hmm.
that having that excitement. So it ended up being the perfect fit.
I'm so glad that you brought up that you liked the numbers, right? Because I think that, well, there is definitely creativity that's in marketing and advertising, right? And I think like the first exposure that we have to advertising is like seeing commercials on TV and like halftime ads, like our Super Bowl commercials, right? That's something that we all experience as young kids growing up in the US. But I think that a lot of small marketing agencies and even like the solopreneur marketing consultants or whatever, they forget that it really comes back to the numbers, right? And so, like, when I work with marketing agencies and they're struggling with either lead generation or retention, I have to look at the product. And a lot of the times, if their clients are not getting a positive ROI, then the product that they're selling as a marketing agency is flawed, right? Because it really
Mm.
does come back to the numbers.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
how has that helped you to grow your agency, having like a numbers background and being able to focus on that?
Yeah, oh, so many comments on this. So first,
Yes.
I kind of like to say, like the work we do isn't always like the sexy work, It's not like, oh, let us show you our beautiful portfolio.
Right.
It's more like let us show you the results we're driving for our
Thank
clients.
you.
So
Thank you very much for
yes,
doing that. More people need to hear this.
yeah, well, and I think that's for me, that's like the most fulfilling part, right? And
Mhm,
working in the health space is so rewarding because
mhm,
the work that we're doing is helping have a positive impact on so many other people's lives. So if we can
right.
get our clients more patients, more clients, then that's a ripple effect of wellness, which is my passion, my mission and vision is to positively impact as many lives as possible. So we and if we're not driving results, if we're just creating beautiful things, then yeah, there might be a moment of joy or
Yes.
a little bit of a temporary impact, but the lasting impact comes from really looking at the numbers and seeing how we're impacting the bottom line of our
Mhm.
clients and driving real results.
Yeah, absolutely. I think um, if you look at any marketing director at a big company, like maybe a Fortune 500 company, they're looking at data and reports like constantly. It's not like, hey, let's create this really pretty thing. It's, how is this impacting our lead generation? How is this impacting our revenue? Like all of those numbers help them to drive the decisions. And of course, you do want to create something that, will get top of mind awareness or whatever, or stop the scroll or whatever, metric you want with that particular deliverable. At the end of the day, though, it's got to make money. Like it's got to
Mhm.
make money for the organization, or if for an agency, it's got to make money for our clients. Right.
Yeah, and I know, obviously there's so many different types of agencies out there. So there
Hmm.
are creative agencies that are just producing those types of assets, and then there hopefully, are some other agencies that are supporting how those assets are being implemented and
Hmm.
used. And there is obviously something to be said about visually, aesthetically pleasing um, collateral and materials and how that gets us to engage and the opinions we form about those brands. But then
Hmm.
again, what happens next?
Yeah,
So I think that's really important as an agency is to not shy away from those conversations with your clients. We're having some of those hard conversations about as much as we can about the direct impact and the direct return on investment of our
hmm,
initiatives. And a lot of times it's hard to track that. And we
yeah.
don't have that, complete and total view of the entire buyer's journey. But even just having those conversations can be really enlightening and can reinforce with our clients that we're paying attention to these things. We're not just about pushing out pretty visuals and fun copy.
I love that. I love that you guys are having those conversations. Yeah, then that is some of the complaints that marketing agencies have, is like the attribution, right? It's like, well, we can't actually prove that it came from us. Well, okay, like maybe you can't get it down to the penny, but we can make a very strong hypothesis, and justify the investment and how it's working. So that's great.
Absolutely. Well, and I know we're gonna talk about process a little bit, but there's definitely some tools that help support that. So
Hmm.
making sure you have the right tools in place. And we do try to establish up front some of those metrics we're trying to collect
Hmm.
from clients and make it as easy as possible for them to be providing us with that information if we don't have direct access to it.
Yeah.
So having that, again, having that
Hmm.
conversation up front, but building out some of the systems to support that
Yeah.
communication of information and collection of data is super important.
Well, I love that. I mean, this is a perfect segue because now I'm curious, right? So you have a team of around 8 people, I think. So small, nimble team,
Mhm.
doing big things. What are some of the tools? I would actually like to start with the reporting side because we were kind of on that topic. Is like, what are some of the tools that you guys are using to help you prove ROI with your clients? What are some of the tools that have helped you guys to do that?
Yeah, so one of the and we're HubSpot partners, so
Okay.
we do use HubSpot for a
Okay.
number of our clients, which has that closed loop reporting. So there is
Hmm.
quite a bit of visibility into, okay, this, Facebook ad drove this contact, which
Hmm.
submitted this form, which then converted into, this type of client.
Love it.
So there's that whole cycle and
Hmm.
visibility into that with that type of tool, like a good CRM or a good marketing automation tool.
Hmm.
And that's just one of many. But then I think some of it is more manual and a little more clunky. But if we're collecting data from the client side, how are we having them send that to us, input it? What systems do we have even just in Google Drive and Google Sheets? How are we collecting that information? So there's some more manual types of tools that we're putting together to pull that as well.
Hmm. And how are you guys communicating the results with clients? Because sometimes see agencies just sending an email, and I'm like, that's never going to get read or reviewed. Do you guys have a process that you use to communicate with clients and like prove results?
We send an email. No, I'm just kidding. Well,
Okay.
we do send an email.
It's like, shame on you.
um, but I mean, we are having live conversations too. So most of our larger clients we're meeting with on a regular basis to kind of discuss those results. And it's interesting because, you know, fortunately and unfortunately, right? In every challenge, there's opportunity. We'll see, we're coming to a call and we're like super pumped about the results we're seeing and what's coming through. And then they've got feedback for us that's showing us like, hey, they're not seeing that same quality or that same excitement because of XYZ. So I think live conversations are super important in delivering that type of information because to your point, they're likely not going to read it in an email or they're going to see it and they're going to have their own opinions about what those results mean to them. Unless we have a conversation, we're not going to be aligned. So I think just the conversation piece is a big part of that, good communication and results.
Good. Love it. What are some of the other processes that you guys have developed? I don't know, maybe we just pick the top two that have really helped to move the needle for the agency.
So, we have been using Asana, our
Hmm.
project management tool, for a little, I think we're coming up on 2 years,
Hmm.
and that has evolved, and our project coordinator, Natalie, is phenomenal at keeping us up to date on all the different features and the AI integrations and
Hmm.
possibilities, but having that tool has been really helpful in organizing our team internally and streamlining our processes, our new project
Hmm.
onboarding, really everything, has
Can we
become
actually,
easier.
yeah, can we dive into more of that? Like what are some of the things that you implemented? Let's just take the onboarding, for example. What are some of the steps that you've implemented in the onboarding that have been that you look back and you're like, man, I should have done this earlier.
Should have done this earlier. Yeah, just I think the templates. So
Okay.
we have some templates in place that
Hmm.
are, as soon as we have a new client starting, we can clone and create a project out of that template, which has all
Hmm.
of the different steps of, the onboarding process.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect.
and then, you can tinker with it, modify it depending on the client, but even just having a base template is super helpful. And it just makes it easy for really for anyone on the team to support these processes. So someone can step in more easily if needed to say, like right now we have one of the girls on our team who's out for 2 weeks, that can step in and kind of fill in on certain roles because we have these processes in place more easily. So that was huge. We actually have, I'm like very much a process person, like, and I think it's
Me too.
um,
Yeah.
surprising. Well, you're in the right line of business then with what you do.
Yeah, of course.
Um, but I think, being a smaller agency, people are often surprised by how organized we are. But we have, our SOP library, we have a
Hmm.
best practices library, we've got our Radiant resource library, which has all these tools,
Hmm.
available to everybody. But that client onboarding and having those templates available has been really helpful. And same thing with employee onboarding. So again, we're
Hmm.
not hiring super often, so sometimes it's hard to prioritize creating processes around things that you're not doing every single day.
Hmm.
But we created an employee onboarding process and template in
Great.
Asana, and that has been super helpful.
Hmm.
Definitely love that because it frees you up to focus on some more of the fun stuff. And then you've got all the, technical, like little stuff to get through,
Yeah.
already set up for you.
That's great. So I have another question around the processes specifically, and this is a challenge that I see other agencies or I see agencies having is that they build out all these processes, but then they find that they're not always being followed, right? So like I have some ways to fix this, but like what are some of the things or checks and balances that you have in place to make sure that the processes are being followed, and if somehow there is a step that's missed, that you guys are catching it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like continuous learning, right? And
Right.
and process improvement for sure. But I think some of the things that help us keep that top of mind, we always touch on processes that are, we're feeling some, friction on in our weekly
Hmm.
stand-up calls. So we have a weekly stand-up all team call.
Hmm.
And then we also do some scheduled and some sporadic team trainings. So if there's a process that applies to the whole team, then that's something that we'll get on the calendar to just revisit and keep top of mind.
Hmm.
um and then if there's something we're like, okay, we're starting to see there's some challenges in this process, let's do a more impromptu training on this one.
Hmm.
And again, more of those one-on-one conversations too, so like just revisiting a process with an individual team member that might be struggling in certain areas.
Right.
um and then we have something that we've implemented more recently too, that's kind of like a project relief check-in call where
Hmm.
we'll, touch on some of those processes too. So Natalie, our project coordinator, will get on a call with a team member, and can review those individually with them too.
Love it.
But it is, I mean, it is like for some of the stuff, it's definitely a lot of work. Like our Asana process documentation evolves fairly
Yeah.
constantly. So when we do update that documentation, we, do a team reminder. When we might do a team training,
Hmm.
um, but definitely try to be diligent about using, updating, sharing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is one of those things. It's like, we're people, and sometimes we just make mistakes, and that's normal. And so we do have to have a process in place to catch that, because I've found that a lot of the times when you find that a team member is making a mistake like that, a lot of the times they don't know. And so you kind of have to bring it to their attention and then walk backwards and figure out, like, okay, how can we ensure that this is not going to happen again? And there's a
Hmm.
number of different reasons, like when I look at all the reasons why, because at one point in time, I had over 100 employees. And so, there's a lot of people to manage, and the overwhelming majority of them were production employees. And so one of the tools actually that we used that was very helpful was time tracking, right? So like we would look at
Mm-hmm.
time tracking data and we would start to figure out, why is this person falling behind, right? Or why is this person having challenges with their QA, right? Like the quality of the deliverables is not where it needs to be. We would dial it back, and then, or we would look at the time tracking data, and then we could figure out who it was and then find a history of the
Mm-hmm.
challenges. And sometimes it was as simple as they had a computer that was really, really slow, and they couldn't afford to buy a new one, and they were too embarrassed to ask us for one. Well, it's kind of back on our fault, or on my fault, because we had budget set aside for everybody to get a new computer. So all they had to do was say, "Hey, my computer's not working," and then we would have jumped in and shipped them a new one instantly, because all of our team members were remote, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, we can't really blame them for that, but it was an issue, right? And so we would have to go back and talk to them and then fix it. If there was a process problem, as you mentioned, like, it really goes back to training and communicating, right? And just making sure that they understand the expectation, kind of like coaching, not really like blaming them for the mistake, coaching them to get better, but also setting an expectation of like, hey, by this date, I expect you to have this problem resolved. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
our next conversation is not going to be very fun for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and especially when you have a small team, it's such a collaborative, like teamwork sort of environment. So
Hmm.
if this process is a good process, which sometimes is the case, right? So what do they say? Like, 80% of the time, it's not the people, it's the process. So, like,
Yeah.
to your point, yes, people make mistakes and we're human and there's going to be things like that. But a lot of times it could be like, let's revisit this process to see if
Totally.
anything needs to change here. Um, but it's also, I think, and this could totally vary depending on your culture, but we have a very collaborative, very communicative, very supportive culture. And
Hmm.
so if we're not following steps of the process and we know it's, hindering the work of other people, like we're much more likely to be like, okay, I need to buckle down and fix my role in this.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's very rarely ill intention or, again, intentional that someone's bypassing steps or doing things wrong. It's like
Yeah.
that training is so necessary, and reminders and coaching for sure. I totally agree with that.
How do you go about changing processes, but not changing too much? Because I also see that there can be a overcompensation that happens where you're like, okay, we got to change it. Oh wait, that's not working. We got to change it again, and then it can devolve into chaos. How do you
Mhm.
balance that out, or do you guys have a process for that?
We don't have a process. I would say the main thing might be how we've established like our process documentation and our best practice documentation. So in some cases, there's like with the best practice, there's more flexibility. So it might not be a process we need to follow, and we were trying to fit this thing into a process, but instead it's like best practice guidelines. Here's, we're trying to achieve this outcome. Like here's some suggestions and our ways of working. Um, so that would be one of the things that I would say is identifying, the distinction between does this need to be a step-by-step process, or is it more like a guiding, best practice document? And that way too, like if you're finding, you're changing a lot of things because the steps aren't being followed, but you're still getting the same outcome and it's, working, then might maybe shift that process to best practices.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that
Gotcha.
really answers your question, but I mean, there's
It does.
definitely processes we have that we're like, oh, we want to kind of tinker with this, and that's more of like, let's sit on it, think on it, and decide the benefit of changing. That whole idea of like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Like, if unless
Right.
this is causing us significant pain points, then like let's just leave it as it is for now.
Hmm.
With this kind of optimization in the back of our mind, and if 3 months down the road we're like, this has become bigger or more of a problem, then we can implement it.
Yeah, it's really interesting now, especially with AI, right? So, like, there's lots of tools that you can implement now to improve a process. But then at the same time, there's a new tool coming out like every single day. And I think what most people find is that, like, the sizzle of like the AI
Mm,
software and what they say that it can do does not really live up to the hype. So sometimes those things can create more issues than it's worth. But one of the things that we do is, we say to the operations manager or the whoever's overseeing fulfillment, like part of your job responsibility is to improve the processes, at least one process every single quarter, right? So like
Mhm,
find at
mhm,
least one thing that you can improve the efficiency of, and it doesn't have to be massive. Like obviously, like there's a cost of implementation. So the cost of implementation has to be lower than the benefit of
mhm,
of like what we're going to get once it's implemented. But essentially, like if you can find a process that you can improve even by 10%, and it's not going to cost us too much, and it's not going to disrupt everybody, right? Let's do it. And if we can do those once a quarter, that would be amazing. Because when you think about it, like you make 4 10% improvements over the course of a
mhm.
year, that's amazing, right? Get more out of the team, everybody's happier, product quality goes up, like everybody wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that kind of having that goal, that
Hmm.
quarterly goal in mind. And what do they say? Like 1% improvement every day is like what gets
Exactly.
you. So,
Right.
no, I think that's a great idea. And that goes back to your comment on time tracking, which
Hmm.
we used, it was previously T sheets. Now it's
Hmm. Hmm.
QuickBook time,
Yep.
to track our time. But that's, a great place to kind of look at that and see like how much time is being used for these different processes and use that as your baseline to
Hmm.
establish that 10% improvement. Like we're trying to cut back time or whatever, whatever the goal is, but that time tracking is really helpful for those types of things too.
That's great. I've never heard of the QuickBooks one actually. The one that we really like is called, because it ties in really nicely with ClickUp, is called. Oh my God, why does this name always escape me? I'm gonna have to. It'll come back to me in a second. Wait, hold on. Now I gotta Google it. Give me 1 second. We're gonna EverHour. Okay,
Every
so
hour.
edit that part out. It's EverHour. For those that are listening, I just Google it right now, and it's EverHour. So we really, really like EverHour, because it can track back to the task. So
Mhm.
it can go back to the client, but then it can go a layer deeper and it can track back to the task. So let's say we have a client and we've got 4 different deliverables that we're working on for that specific client. Well, it'll track like, hey, this is an SEO project that we're doing. This is a copywriting project. This is a design project, and then it'll track time to every single one of those things, so that we can see how much we're spending for that SEO project, copywriting project, um, design project, right? And so that we can track it back, because I personally want to know how much we're making on every single thing that we do. Like every time somebody's finger touches a keyboard, it does cost us money. And so I want to know what's the ROI on that. That's because
Mhm.
I like to get that granular with the numbers. I'm not an accountant, by the way. Went to school for sociology, but my dad is an engineer. So I think maybe that's where I got it from.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I love that, and we have a system, our client profitability tracking, so
mhm,
that's, like, by client, by service, so it's very similar to what you're saying. We
yeah.
don't have, like, that real-time time tracking tool within our project management tool. We explored a little bit of the Asana time tracking,
Hmm.
so there is, a little bit of a disconnect there, but it's
Hmm.
definitely helpful even just tracking it like we are to see, where we have overages month over month, like in which
Yeah.
specific service and how we can, potentially improve either like the delivery of that service or other aspects of it. So
I
right there with you on the
I love that you're tracking that, because agencies of your size are not doing that yet. It's very, very rare. I don't know if you have a lot of friends that run agencies, but what you're doing, being able to track profitability by product and client, nobody else does that at your size. That's like a huge competitive advantage
oh.
you have.
Well, and I think, I mean, it's probably because I like the number side of things so much,
Yeah.
but I also like opportunity, right? And to see, and of course, maximizing your profit.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's having that data, and this is actually something a former employee helped us to implement this whole system, and I'm
Hmm.
forever grateful for that because it has really given us that visibility
Hmm.
and to be more proactive. So we're like, okay, we're seeing this overage in this area. Let's go back to the client and see if we can get
Hmm.
some more time, or let's
Yeah.
make sure the next time we're quoting this service, we're considering these things. So it's definitely given us a lot more forward thinking versus like
Yeah.
looking back and being like, dang.
So smart. So smart. I'm so glad that you all are doing that. So we've got a couple minutes left. So what does the future hold for Radiant? Like, what are you working on now that you're really, really excited about?
So something that we are in the health space, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
and love being there. I think that the more I've been in this space, the more I've realized the importance of like root cause medicine or functional integrative medicine. And so
Mm.
we're really trying to expand our footprint and our market share in that space. It's a new and emerging space, but it's something that's getting a lot of traction. So if there's any listeners out there in that space,
Is
it's
that
just something.
something that you've stumbled upon personally, or that you came upon it like from a business perspective?
So I came upon it from a business perspective and then learned that personally I could benefit from this. So I've actually
Yeah,
gone on my own personal health journey in this way as
me
well, and
too.
have
Yeah,
right seen
yeah.
the transformative impact of like real medicine, not like
Mm.
medication based medicine. And so if I can get more people exposed to these solutions from a health perspective, like that it could be, it's just that's the impact that I want to make and I want my
Yeah.
agency to make in this world. So excited to continue to explore that. It's kind of like, just on the
I
verge.
love that too as well. Yeah, that's so cool. So I'll just like a little tip. I won't go into much detail, but I had to take a lot of antibiotics last year and it overloaded my system. So I didn't know you could
Mhm.
do this, but there's a thing called medicine induced hepatitis. And that happened
Mm.
to me. So my liver went crazy, right?
Oh
Then
no.
I tore my ACL and I had to get surgery and they pumped me full of more and more medicine. And my liver went crazy even more, like really, really bad. And I was very worried. And so I go to the doctor, and this is like one of the frustrating things with doctors. Maybe you've experienced this too. I was like, well, what can I do? Because I feel terrible. And clearly this is really bad. And he's like, well, we can give you more medicine. I'm like, are you kidding me? Medicine is what messed me up in the first place. So
Oh,
I did some research and I can read a medical journal, right, or a medical article. And so I start doing some research and they say that like a vegetarian diet can really help with your liver enzymes. And so I went full vegan for 10 days and my liver enzymes dropped by 80%. So I wasn't in the normal range, but in 10 days it was insane how much they improved. And so I kept
yeah.
up with that for months and months and months. I was vegetarian this year for 7 months, which is awful. Um, then, then my liver enzymes weren't dropping even more, and my doctor's giving me no advice,
No, no support. Yeah.
nothing.
Mhm.
My
Typical.
gastroenterologist is giving me nothing. He's like, "Well, this looks really good. You should continue with that." I'm like, "Thanks, buddy." So then I do another test. This is in July, and the liver enzymes should have been back to normal, but they went up.
Mm.
And I was like, man. And I started thinking about what was eating because obviously the vegetarian diet had a big benefit for me. And I had eaten a lot of bread, and I actually had bread or toast and jelly. Like 2 days before I had a lot of it because I got one speed.
Like a loaf of bread and a jar of jelly.
Basically, yeah, a loaf of sourdough bread and a jar of jelly and some butter, and then I did my liver enzyme test, and so I read that sugar and glucose levels can also impact your liver enzymes. So I'm like, I wonder what happens if I cut out all sugar. So I cut out all sugar and I retest and the liver enzymes came back. And I'm like,
Oh
okay,
wow.
cool. Well, I can probably let's see what happens when I reintroduce meat. Because the problem with me, my body, is when I don't have that protein source, I lost all my muscle like very,
Hmm.
very fast. I
Hmm.
work out like
Hmm.
crazy. And I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. So like I started introducing meat. My muscle mass started to increase, and then I got another test. Couple 3 weeks after that, and I was back in the clear.
Awesome.
And none of this
Yeah.
came from the traditional doctor,
Right.
right?
Well, if people take away one thing from this call,
Yeah.
it's how important your gut health is, right?
Yes.
So
Totally.
don't listen to
Totally.
anything else we said before this. No, I'm just kidding. But I think like and your body can heal itself. Like so if you feed it the right things, right? And there's
Right.
obviously like other things to consider, but if
Yeah.
you're trying to achieve, some new level of health and wellness, like definitely look at your gut health as a
Yeah.
indicator of what is going on. I mean, that's from like if you're having skin conditions, if you're
Mhm.
having inflammation, like everything could
Yep.
be, bettered by healing your gut. So,
Yeah.
but it's unfortunate that you had to go on that journey by yourself, that you had to do all that self discovery. Like, not many people have those resources or that understanding or that motivation to even just start that. So,
Mhm.
a lot of these practices that I mentioned are the ones that help kind of partner with you in that journey and
Mhm.
really dig into it. And the testing piece is so critical, right? Because
Right.
without the tests, you wouldn't have known. And then you have those benchmarks and where you're trying to get. And a lot of times, we're individuals that all have different um, things influencing how, if what inflammation and
Mhm.
health and everything. So with specialized testing, which is a lot of that root cause medicine, you're able to see your individual makeup and factors and give a really good idea of where you need to start, what you need to focus on.
Love it.
So,
Yeah. I mean,
well, I'm
I
glad you got back to where you needed to
yeah.
be and
Oh
you're
man, it was
able
a
to eat
long,
meat.
long journey. But I love this niche for you. I know that there's a story behind it. I think for all the listeners that are out there, like when I work with an agency and they don't have a niche or they're trying to find a new niche, I always go back. I'm like, what connects to you? Like, what do you
Hmm.
feel a connection to, or where is there a story behind it? Right. And I think that when you have that legitimate connection, that's going to be transferred to the clients and they're going to be like, wow, this person actually understands my business. Right. And I
Yeah,
think that's going to help you grow.
completely. Well, and
Yeah.
it's so funny because we do that for our clients, right? But then we neglect to do that for ourselves. So
Oh,
yeah, totally
all
agree.
the time, all the time. Cobbler's son has no shoes, as they say.
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Karen, for going on the show. What's the best way that somebody can get in contact with you? If they want to just connect with you because you're awesome, or maybe they have a referral for you, it's the best way to reach
Yeah.
out.
I mean, just check us out at radiantmarketingaz.com. You can find all of our information on there. Thank you for
Perfect.
having me.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. All right. For all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Reach out to Karen. She's a super, super nice person. And we hope to see you on the next episode. Bye. Hey, thank you for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, it would mean so much to me if you would subscribe to the podcast and also share it with friends, family, and basically anyone you know who will find the same value in this episode as you do. So, to get the latest from me, then let's connect on social media on the Facebooks at facebook.com or Instagram. Then you can also find us on LinkedIn, YouTube. Finally, go to our website where you can see all of our other episodes of Operation Agency Freedom. Register for live trainings on how to run a highly profitable agency, and you can see exactly how we help marketing agencies fix their operations and scale to 8 figures and beyond. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you next time.